He was the man who introduced us to the big drama show. The Kazakh powerhouse Gennadiy Golovkin was one of the most exciting and brutal fighters we've ever seen. His relentless aggression, coupled with devastating knockout power, made him one of boxing's most feared middleweights. But just how good was he? Well, join me as I delve into his career and answer the ultimate question. How good was Gennadiy Gennadyevich Golovkin actually? Before we dive into today's video, I want to take a moment to talk about something really important, that being mental health. It's something we all deal with at some point, and for some of us it can hit harder than others. I'll be honest, I've had my own struggles with stress and anxiety, especially post the pandemic. That's why I can't express enough how helpful it can be to talk to a therapist. Just talking to someone outside of your friends and family about your worries and concerns can be a huge weight lifted off your shoulders and can be massively beneficial, but it can be sometimes confusing as to how to get started. And that brings me on to today's paid partnership, BetterHelp, who are all about simplifying the start of therapy. With BetterHelp, getting started is super simple. You just fill out a questionnaire and they match you with a credentialed therapist as soon as possible. Your therapist is there to listen, ask thoughtful questions, and help you see things from a fresh perspective. They'll share practical advice and techniques to help you make positive changes in your life. And if you feel your therapist isn't the right fit, no problem. You can switch to a different one at no extra cost. BetterHelp has over 7,000 reviews and a 4.3 star rating on Trustpilot, so you know it's a platform you can trust. If you're ready to give it a try, click the link in the description or head to betterhelp.com/thefightponderer to get 10% off your first month of therapy. Golovkin was born on April 8, 1982 in the city of Karaganda in the Kazakh Soviet Union. Golovkin's journey in the sport of boxing first began when his two elder brothers encouraged him to box when he was just 8 years old. As a youth, Golovkin would walk the streets with his brothers and they would often pick fights for him with fully grown men. When the brothers asked him if he was afraid, Golovkin would respond no and be told to fight. Golovkin said that his brothers had been doing this since he was in kindergarten and that every day it would be different guys to fight. When Golovkin was 9 years old, his two older brothers joined the Soviet army. Tragically, in 1990, the government had informed Golovkin's family that his brother Vadim was dead, and 4 years later, the government also told Golovkin's family that his other elder brother Sergei was also dead. Golovkin's brothers had a profound influence on his career, and his tough upbringing undoubtedly shaped him as a person and as a fighter. At 10 years old, Golovkin would transfer his street fighting skills to the boxing ring and enter his first gym. Golovkin began taking the sport more seriously at the age of 11, where he first started to box competitively, and he went on to win the local Karaganda regional tournament in the cadet division. Golovkin was an elite amateur and won gold medals in several amateur tournaments, most notably at the 2003 World Amateur Boxing Championships in Bangkok, where he defeated future two-time champion Matvey Korobov, as well as future world champions Andy Lee and Lucien Bute. In 2004, Golovkin would go one step further and represent his nation of Kazakhstan at the Athens Summer Olympics. In the middleweight category, Golovkin would reach the finals and take home a silver medal. Golovkin's amateur career has been reported to be 345 wins and 5 losses, although records show he had at least 8 losses. Regardless of what Golovkin's official record actually is, we can conclude that Golovkin was an elite level amateur. After ending his amateur career in 2005, the talented Kazakh fighter would sign a promotional deal with German promoter Universum, the same promotion that worked with the Klitschko brothers. For the first part of his career, Golovkin's fights would all be in Germany, and the German public would soon realise that this Kazakh fighter was one of the best prospects in the sport. He would quickly become a feared name due to his devastating punching power, which would brutalise his opponents. As well as his highlight reel KOs, Golovkin also showed he had great boxing ability and fight IQ. He had tremendous balance, and his ability to cut off the ring was impressive. By the end of 2009, Golovkin amassed an impressive 18-0 record, with 15 of those wins coming by KO. In January 2010, Golovkin terminated his contract with Universum due to him not being able to get the fights that he wanted, and he felt that the promotion had no real plans for him. Golovkin would then sign with K2 Promotions and move to the United States to train in Big Bear, California with veteran trainer Abel Sanchez. Sanchez sought to add Mexican-style aggression to Golovkin's Eastern European-style amateur discipline. Golovkin's first fight with Sanchez came against Milton Nunes for the WBA interim title. Golovkin would prove Nunes did not belong in the ring with him. From the start, Triple G attacked Nunes with power shots and battered him until he eventually dropped him with multiple left hands. Nunes got back up, but he was dazed and confused, and the referee waved the fight off. Golovkin had now captured the WBA interim middleweight title. On June 18, 2011, Golovkin would encounter his first big test in his professional career, when he faced the tough Ugandan fighter Kassim Ouma. Unlike most of Triple G's opponents thus far, Kassim refused to be walked through. Golovkin was landing hard punches, but Kassim was able to handle his power and battle back. Golovkin was trying to overpower the Ugandan, who was constantly firing back and standing up to Golovkin's punches. As the fight progressed, Kassim's output increased and he was causing Golovkin problems with his fast hands. Eventually, Kassim was starting to slow down and Golovkin was finding more success. By the 9th round, Kassim's face was swelling and bruised, and Golovkin would continue to make it worse with more hard shots. In the 10th round, Golovkin continued to punish Kassim, and eventually the referee jumped in and stopped the fight. Triple G took more punishment in this fight than in any other, but he prevailed once again and broke down yet another fighter. In December of 2011, in Dusseldorf, Germany, Golovkin would defend his WBA regular belt against Lewan Simon of Philadelphia. Golovkin landed a pair of solid right hands early into the fight and would land a left hook that caught Simon coming forward, which put him flat on his back. Simon didn't get to his feet and was counted out. Golovkin would retain his WBA middleweight title and had also captured the vacant IBO middleweight title. On the 20th of July 2012, it was announced that Golovkin would defend his titles against European champion and the ring's number 10 rated middleweight, Grzegorz Proska. In Golovkin's American debut, he put on an impressive performance, battering Proska and stopping him in the 5th round. In October of 2012, the WBA super middleweight champion Daniel Geale signed to fight Anthony Modine in a rematch instead of fighting his mandatory challenger Golovkin. The WBA then stripped Geale of the title and named Golovkin the WBA middleweight champion. Golovkin's next fight would be against ring's number 9 ranked middleweight Gabriel Rosado. Golovkin would continue his excellent knockout streak and force a 7th round stoppage against a bloodied but spirited Rosado in the first defense of his WBA middleweight title. On the 29th of June 2013, Golovkin would take on 2-time world title challenger Matthew Macklin. This was billed as Golovkin's toughest opponent to date. Golovkin dominated the first 2 rounds, landing clean and effective shots. In the 3rd round, Golovkin landed a right uppercut, followed by a left hook to the body, which folded Macklin. There was no way Macklin was going to recover. You could just see the intense pain on his face, that body shot crippled him. Still to this day, this is my favourite knockout of Golovkin's entire career. Just the sheer brutality of it was a sight to behold. Golovkin's next defense of his titles came against top 10 ranked middleweight contender Curtis Stevens at Madison Square Garden. Golovkin broke Stevens down with ferocious punches to the head and body and eventually dropped Stevens hard in the 2nd from 2 left hooks. After plenty of punishment from Golovkin, Stevens' corner finally called the fight off in the 8th round. On the 3rd of June 2014, after 10 successful title defenses, the WBA officially elevated Golovkin from regular middleweight champion to super champion. He was also granted special permission to defend his title against Ring Magazine's number 2 ranked middleweight Daniel Geale. Golovkin dropped Geale in the 2nd round and a hard right in the 3rd sent Geale down again, from which he never recovered. Golovkin would next fight former multiple-time world title challenger and current interim WBC champion Marco Antonio Rubio. As many expected, Golovkin would walk through Rubio and knock him out with a left hand in the 2nd. Golovkin retained his WBA Super and IBO middleweight titles and won the WBC interim title, which made him mandatory challenger to the full title holder Miguel Cotto. On the 21st of February 2015, Golovkin defended his middleweight titles against tough British contender Martin Murray. Murray was a big, strong and technically decent middleweight and posed a decent threat to Golovkin. Murray proved to be durable and fought to a solid game plan, which gave Golovkin some problems early on. However, as the fight entered the 4th round, Golovkin was landing more easily on Murray and dropped the challenger twice in the round. Murray's chin withstood a lot of heavy shots from Golovkin in the middle rounds, but eventually he was broken down and would meet the canvas for the 3rd time in the 10th round. The tough Brit survived into round 11, which was impressive and made him the first man to take Golovkin past 10 rounds. However, as tough as Murray was, he wasn't fighting back effectively and was taking too many shots, and eventually the referee stopped the fight. Just a few months on from the Murray fight, Golovkin would defend his titles against American contender Willie Monroe Jr. Monroe started the fight fast, using his excellent movement and jab, but it didn't take long for Golovkin to find his range, and in round 2 he would land a perfectly timed left hook, which dropped Monroe. The American got back up, but it was clear he didn't have control of his legs, and he would soon be put down again by a right hand. Monroe got back up and was fighting bravely for the next few rounds, but Golovkin was outworking him and was landing rapid and powerful hooks and uppercuts. In the 6th round, Golovkin staggered Monroe with a right hand and backed him on the ropes, where he would unload heavy combinations which dropped Monroe for the 3rd time. The referee asked him if he wanted to continue, to which Monroe said, "I'm done." In the post-fight interview, Golovkin said that he wanted a unification fight next, and that's exactly what he would get in Madison Square Garden against IBF world champion David Lemieux. Lemieux was one of the very best middleweights on earth at the time, and Golovkin's toughest opponent to date. Yet Golovkin made him look average. The skill gap in the fight was huge. Golovkin was technically superior and totally outclassed the French Canadian. Lemieux was struggling to land clean and effective shots and just didn't trouble Golovkin at all. In the 5th round, Golovkin was putting together his shots well and landed a crushing left hook to the body, which dropped Lemieux. Fortunately for Lemieux, there was only a couple seconds left in the round, and he was able to survive into round 6. In round 8, Golovkin had Lemieux hurt from a body shot once again, and the referee jumped in to stop the fight just before Golovkin unloaded another barrage of punches. It was a statement performance from Golovkin, who made one of the best in the division look mediocre. On the 10th of September 2016, Golovkin would travel to merry old England to take on undefeated IBF welterweight champion Special K Kell Brook. Brook was too small and not powerful enough to gain the respect of Golovkin. He shouldn't have been anywhere near Golovkin and should have remained at welterweight, but that's a totally different conversation, and I've made a video on Brook's career where I talk about that issue further if you're interested. In the early rounds, Brook looked decent, he was boxing well and landed clean punches, and he put up probably a better performance than the majority of Golovkin's opponents if I'm being honest. However, Golovkin would make the adjustments and started to break down Brook, cutting off the ring and unleashing heavy shots. Brook's chin held up well to a lot of the onslaught from Golovkin, but eventually the damage caused by Golovkin became too much, and Brook's trainer Dominic Ingle threw in the towel, which most likely saved Brook from going blind, as it was found out later after the fight that Brook's right eye socket was broken. It was a career-altering fight for Brook, and this was the case with so many of Golovkin's opponents. They were just never the same fighter after they fought him. Following this win over Brook, there was immediate talks of a WBA unification fight against then regular champion Daniel Jacobs, and so a fight with Jacobs was scheduled for the 18th of March 2017. In front of a sellout crowd, Jacobs gave Golovkin his toughest fight to date. The American used his superior size and great boxing skills to cause Golovkin problems. In the 4th round, Golovkin had Jacobs backed up onto the ropes and landed 2 heavy right hands that dropped him. Jacobs wasn't overly hurt and recovered quickly. Golovkin was in control in the middle rounds, using good ring generalship and forward pressure. Jacobs was finding his own success with his fast and heavy hands, and at times in the fight, Jacobs was actually schooling Golovkin. For the first time in his professional career, Golovkin would be taking the full championship distance and would win by unanimous decision. This ended his 23-fight knockout streak, which dated all the way back to November of 2008. This was a very controversial decision at the time, as many believed Jacobs did enough to win. Now, was this a robbery? Not in my opinion. I feel like fans cry robbery every time they see a fighter perform way better than expected and they make the fight competitive. I've seen people say they thought Jacobs won the fight easily, but I just don't see that at all. On September 16th, 2017, Golovkin would take on Canelo Alvarez in a unification fight for the WBA, WBC, IBF, IBO, Ring Magazine, and Lineal middleweight titles. This was a hard fight to judge because it really came down to what you look for in a fight. Golovkin had the better work rate and aggression in the fight, and utilised his jab incredibly well, while Canelo landed the more cleaner and eye-catching shots. For me, I had Golovkin winning the fight by just a round or two. As much as Canelo was, in my opinion, landing the more quality punches, it just wasn't consistent enough. Overall, it was a highly competitive fight between 2 truly elite operators, After 12 rounds of entertaining action, the fight was deemed a split decision draw. Now, when you hear some people talk about this fight, you would honestly think it's on the levels of Roy Jones Jr.'s robbery in the Olympics. I really didn't come away from watching this fight and thought it was a robbery. I'll just be truly honest, I thought Golovkin won, but it was a close fight, and to be honest, I'm not complaining that it was a draw. Immediately after the controversial ending to their first encounter, talks of a rematch between the two began. In January of 2018, HBO announced the rematch would take place on Cinco de Mayo weekend. The fight was put in doubt when, on the 5th of March 2018, Alvarez tested positive for the banned substance clenbuterol. On the 3rd of April, Canelo officially withdrew from the rematch and was suspended for 6 months. Former middleweight challenger Varnes Martirosyan stepped in to replace Canelo, but he would be completely overwhelmed and stopped in the second round. On September the 15th, 2018, Golovkin and Canelo would finally meet again in a rematch. The fight was more action-packed compared to their first fight, and honestly, this is some of the highest level of boxing you'll ever see. Both men put on impressive performances. I felt Canelo looked better compared to their first fight, and I'd even say Golovkin looked better too, despite having to fight a different fight. The roles were reversed as Canelo was the one who was on the front foot and was pressuring Golovkin throughout the fight, while Golovkin boxed well on the back foot. Like the first fight, Golovkin was throwing and landing more, but Canelo had the edge in power shots. It was another hard fight to score as both men had plenty of success, and there were lots of back and forth moments. Golovkin, like he did in their first fight, established his jab and used it effectively throughout the fight, and Canelo was focused on landing to the body and breaking down Golovkin. After 12 very entertaining and close rounds, Canelo would win by majority decision, in what for me goes down as an all-time classic. As for the result, I had Canelo by a round in this one. I felt he was much more consistent compared to their first fight, and he maintained a good work rate throughout. Again though, it was an extremely close and competitive fight, and I could see arguments for a draw or Triple G by a round. On the 24th of April 2019, Golovkin released a statement announcing he had split with his longtime trainer Abel Sanchez. The relationship ended acrimoniously, with Sanchez calling Golovkin greedy and ungrateful. Golovkin would enlist the services of Jonathan Banks, best known for his work with former heavyweight champion Vladimir Klitschko. Their first fight together would come against Canadian contender Steve Rolls. Golovkin would steamroll Rolls and knock him out in the 4th round with a left hook. On the 5th of October 2019, Golovkin would fight for the vacant IBF and IBO middleweight titles against Ukrainian contender Sergey Derevyanchenko. Golovkin would strike first in the opening round, landing a 6-punch combination which ended with a right hook that dropped the Ukrainian. Sergey got back up quickly and didn't appear to be hurt. If anything, it spurred him on to go at Golovkin and land his own shots. In the 5th round, Sergey had Golovkin hurt with a body shot. It was a rare moment where Golovkin actually looked hurt in a fight. For me, this fight was the first time that Golovkin showed real sign of vulnerability and decline. Sergey was showing great aggression and work rate, but overall I'd say Golovkin landed the better shots in the fight. After 12 rounds of action had concluded, Golovkin would win by unanimous decision. Again, it was another highly controversial decision with many crying robbery, but for me, it was just another example of a very close fight being considered a robbery. I have no issues with people thinking Derevyanchenko won, but to call this fight a robbery is just not an accurate assessment of the fight in my opinion. In September of 2022, Golovkin would move up to super middleweight to take on Canelo Alvarez in a trilogy fight for the undisputed middleweight titles. This was the least controversial fight out of the trilogy, as Canelo comprehensively beat Golovkin on the night. Now, I don't want to diminish Canelo's victory too much, but let's be honest, Golovkin was not the same fighter that Canelo fought back in 2017 and 2018. This was a heavily reduced version of what was a truly elite fighter, and Canelo caught him at the right time. It was honestly quite a bizarre fight, to be honest. I remember just not really feeling that hyped at all around the time of the fight. Despite being second best throughout the fight, the outstanding chin of Golovkin held up once again, and the fight would go the full 12 rounds where Canelo would win by unanimous decision. Over the next few years following the Canelo fights, Golovkin would vacate his titles, first starting with his IBF title, and eventually his WBA Super title, and finally his IBO World title. As of recording this in the summer of 2025, Golovkin has still not officially retired, but at 43 years old, I can't really see him making a significant comeback in the sport anytime soon. Golovkin's record stands at 42 wins, 2 defeats, 1 draw, capturing the WBA, WBC, IBF and IBO middleweight world titles. So how good was Gennadiy Golovkin actually? For me, Golovkin would give any middleweight in history problems. I was just thinking of fantasy matchups when writing the script for this, and just imagine Golovkin versus Marvin Hagler, or Carl Froch in the battle of who has the best chin. It'd just be fireworks. There's so many great matchups that Golovkin could be in, and he would give any middleweight past or present a hard night's work. Golovkin had superb power in his right hand, a heavy and commanding jab, and great fight IQ. And on top of that, he had a granite chin which saw him go his entire career of 45 fights without being knocked down or stopped. My main critique of Golovkin is his resume, which isn't the greatest in my opinion. Now, in fairness to Golovkin, it isn't entirely his fault. In his prime, it was well known many fighters didn't want anything to do with him, and as well as that, he was unlucky not to have at least one victory over Canelo, which would have massively boosted his resume in terms of quality. Overall, Golovkin was one of the most brutal and entertaining fighters I've ever seen, and regardless of his resume, which is lacking, he still earns himself a place in the top echelons of the middleweight division, just not quite the very best. So let me know what you guys make of Golovkin in the comments below, and as always, thanks very much for watching.